I think that owners need to make this decision not from the place of their need, not from the place of their own financial situation. I think if you don't have the money that you need to spend on marketing, you need to find a way to find that money, right? Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and we're in for a treat because we're going to be talking about client acquisition in the form of marketing. I love these conversations. They never get old or tired because everybody out there has this challenge. Whether it comes easy to you or it feels difficult to you, getting clients consistently is the name of the game when it comes to business growth. Business has two pieces of the puzzle. There's getting clients and there's serving clients, and serving clients requires staff. That's the other side of the equation. So if you can figure out how to find good staff, use them efficiently, and serve your clients in the best way, and if you can figure out how to bring clients in, you've essentially won at business. Profit with Law is all about not just winning at business, but winning at it profitably. So we want to make sure that you're making good decisions when it comes to both of those sides of the equation. And that's why I love having these conversations with marketing experts, because it's important for you to be informed. It's important for you to know what's out there. It's important for you to know what's smart to do and what you should think twice about, or what are the right questions you should be asking when evaluating these kinds of challenges. Our guest today is Bobby Steinbach, co-founder of Mean Pug Digital, where he leads development and marketing efforts. Bobby is maniacal about two core tenets of the Mean Pug philosophy. Integration across the full operational stack is crucial to marketing success, and there's no room for a quote unquote, that isn't our job mentality in a successful marketing team. And actually, in the green room before we started, I started talking to Bobby about this, and I actually love this about his bio and what they do at Mean Pug Digital, because so much of my conversation with prior guests who are in the marketing space has been, how should somebody navigate whether they need your services? Because most marketing agencies out there do one thing really well. Maybe they're a PPC shop. Maybe they're an SEO shop. Maybe they're a web design and web hosting business. Maybe they're buying and selling radio and TV ads or billboards. But to find a company that takes all of that and kind of like says, hey, let us be the CMO for you. Let us figure out and help you understand where is the best place to spend your marketing dollars. That's a breath of fresh air if we can find a really good one. And I'm hoping that our conversation with Bobby will help us to understand how to define whether that's the case. And obviously, he's going to say Mean Pug Digital is a good one, right? So we're going to have that conversation. Really excited about it. With 10 plus years leading teams at startups and large law firms alike, he has a track record of successfully taking products and brands to market through the combination of intelligently blended software X marketing. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Moshe. Happy to be here.
It's my pleasure. And real quick, just give us a backstory of how in the world did you get involved in the legal space? What gave you the idea of starting Mean Pug Digital, and how long have you been on that journey, and how's that been for you so far?
Yep, happy to. My path took me from secondary ticket marketplace, so think StubHub, a competing provider to StubHub, all the way through to a leadership position at Morgan & Morgan, where I was director of engineering, and then through to finally starting the company. So I really got to see, in the beginning, what it's like to be at a startup, what it means to not necessarily have that working capital that a lot of folks might grow accustomed to, and just trying to find revenue quick. And I think that let us have like a really unique lens when it came to the way that we saw marketing and saw the way that we were applying software to our efforts. So that was where I started at Morgan. I did a bunch of stuff as director of engineering there, everything from spinning up new microsites to creating like the monitoring capacity for us to make sure that we're serving all of our visitors in a performant way, and building a ton of like underlying SaaS to help out what we were doing both on the operational side. So what happens post intake and what happens pre intake. So more like the marketing side. I started Mean Pug because I saw the opportunity. Being at Morgan, I saw what the biggest and the best look like. Um, and it was impressive for sure being at Morgan. Those guys understand marketing and scale in a way that I think few can comprehend. But even the very, very best, I kind of felt like we might be able to do some things better.
Hmm.
And especially if we could apply technology to our efforts and apply automation and kind of level the playing field, so to speak, for all the firms that might not have $200 million marketing budgets.
Right.
Um, so we went out, started Mean Pug with the goal of helping every law firm compete in the marketing space.
I love that. I love that, it's like, no no law firm owner left behind kind of mentality. But let's dive into that for a moment, because something that you said before really piqued my interest. And that is, I know that you're positioned best to serve the middle market of small law firms. But you don't say no to solos. So there's a very large um playing field of potential law firm owners, especially that are listening to the show. We do have a lot of solos listening to the show. One of the things that I teach my clients to do is to acquire that capital so that they can invest in themselves and in the growth of their business, which is probably something that solves the problem for anybody that you're serving in that space. But let's just take a bigger, more holistic lens. Let me ask you a very specific question. What do you think that a law firm should target as far as a percentage of their revenue for their marketing budget?
The number that I've always heard thrown around is 20%. Take 20% of your end of year as revenue. No, it must be yeah. It must be your end of year like EBITDA. I don't think it's just revenue and push it back into marketing. Um, that seems to be like a pretty good number, but again, it's kind of hard to be if you're a growth mindset firm and you're young and you don't necessarily have, at home expenses the way somebody older might or whatever, depending on what your working situation is, you might have a different view of this. Like at the end of the day, it's probably best to invest in yourself in rather than invest in the market or invest in bonds or whatever. Assuming you have confidence in what you do, and why are you owning a law firm if you don't?
Yeah, I love the fact that you answered with a very lawyer-like answer, which is it depends, right? But it's true, right? It's very situational. But I think that owners need to make this decision not from the place of their need, not from the place of their own financial situation. I think if you don't have the money that you need to spend on marketing, you need to find a way to find that money, right? And this is the thing that most people get wrong is which comes first? The marketing spend comes before the client acquisition, right? Like if you don't get the phone to ring, you're not going to get the client. And this is something that most business owners do wrong, right? They do it backwards. They say, when I have the money, I'm going to increase the budget of how much I'm willing to spend. The reality is if you're currently at 300,000, you want to be at 1 million in revenue, you have to start spending like $1 million revenue business and marketing in order to get the clients for that. Same
That's right.
thing at every scale, right? Like if I've got a $7 million revenue client, if he wants to go to 10, he's got to start spending on the marketing side like a $10 million firm to bring that additional 3 million in, right? So I think that the reason I like to start with the budget question is because a lot of what we're able to do has to do with what is the budget that's reasonable, right? Like, even if the best thing for me to do is TV spots, if my budget's $10,000 a year and TV spots are going to cost me $10,000 a month, then that's not really something I can even think about doing at my current stage. So I think that financial conversation is important. Since you didn't have a specific, target or percentage, I'll share mine. So a healthy business, and this depends, by the way, and if you're a personal injury firm, I know you're coming from the Morgan and Morgan background. Personal injury, estate planning, there are some businesses where you're able to have significant efficiencies in or you're able to profit off the labor of your staff at a higher level, and therefore it allows more money to be spent on the marketing side. Where somebody who's in litigation, they're doing trial attorney work, they're, so that your family law firm, that kind of stuff, it's more tied to the hours that the attorney's spending, and therefore the profit margin is lower. And therefore you have less money to spend on the marketing side, right? Like you need to allocate less of your budget. But by and large, a law firm that's operating healthy should be in the 5 to 10% range of revenue on marketing. Now, if you're in growth mode, you can tweak it up to 15%. If you're a PI firm, you can go all the way up to 25%. But again, measure that percentage off of the revenue you want, not the revenue you're at. And that bodes the question of, okay, so where do I get the money from? And I don't want to dive into that with you because I have the answer to that. But let me talk about this with you. So we've got somebody who's, let's say they're a solo. They want to get to 1 million in revenue. They want to grow beyond themselves. So they're listening to Moshe and they're saying, okay, I'm willing to put 15% of my $1 million future revenue into marketing. Where do they start? It's probably the first time they're really purposely spending money on marketing. How do they even figure out where to put that money to work? Now they're armed with a $10,000 a month budget.
It's such a complex question. I think there's a couple of ways you can tackle that. The first is look at your time horizons. You can break things out into short, medium, long-term time horizons. Something like PPC, that's going to be an immediate turnaround. So it's your short time horizon, and it's going to fund everything you might want to do on the marketing side for the foreseeable future. But you're kind of, in most scenarios, renting your space, right? So PPC is transient. The market could get expensive. The market could get inexpensive. Typically, it's going to get more expensive year over
Right.
year for the terms that you care about. So that's not going to be a sustainable long-term solution for your client acquisition. Medium term, that's going to be something like we have a product internally. We call it referral network building. For us, that is like a B2B sales pipeline for attorneys. For some folks, I know, Moshe, you and I had talked about running like for was it estate planning,
Estate planning. Yep.
financial planners? Yeah. So helping them create connections with folks outside of legal. That's one way that we can help. Another way that we really commonly help is help firms to build legal referrals. So meeting other attorneys that are in tangential practice areas, right? If you're a workers' comp attorney in Florida, there's no reason you shouldn't have connections with criminal defense, with immigration, with personal injury, so that when they get that person walking in the door who doesn't match their case type, they know who to send it to, right? So we help them establish those relationships. And for us, that typically sees ROI in about 6 months. So that's like your medium term time horizon. And then you've got long term, and that's like your brand, SEO, all those things that are going to be 10, 11, 12 plus months for you to see a meaningful ROI. So that's one way that you can think about allocating your budget, is those buckets of time. But you can also slice it by opportunity, right? So maybe you are in a market where you've already got brand recognition and you want to amplify that, right? Do what works. So it might be that you want to allocate an outsized portion of your spend to things that will increase brand exposure and frequency. So that might be TV, that might be radio, billboard, it might be display ads to hit everybody. So it's really hard to say what exactly will work without deep diving on a strategy. And that's why it's so important to have a bespoke agency, not somebody who's going to plug you into a system that works for their 1,000 other clients, maybe. And so therefore it's going to work for you. That typically is fitting a square peg in a round hole, or a round peg in a square hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does somebody go about figuring this out? Like, is there a formula or something that they can use? I mean, there's two pieces to this equation, right? So it's, do I need cases now? Am I trying to build something for the medium term? Am I trying to build something for the long term? Uh, and so that's first, like, so what are the questions that we should be asking in order to determine that? Obviously, you're asking your clients the questions to help them determine it. So I'm curious if we can share some of that with our listeners. And then the second piece of it, where, hey, maybe if you have brand recognition, then that's the opportunity. Maybe if your, the keywords that you would be certain that you would be, putting in for in PPC, there's nobody competing for those, and it's low hanging fruit. Like, you'd be crazy to not take that and use it. Or maybe this B2B model is the right thing for you. How can we help our listeners just kind of start to get an idea of what direction they should be going, just based on, okay, ask yourself these questions and let's figure out where you're at?
Usually the answer is you want to balance portfolio. The same way you would balance risk in the market, you kind of want to think about your marketing in the same way. So if you are currently overexposed on long term, it probably makes sense to think about ways to spin you up so that you get immediate turnaround on your spend, right? Because maybe you're undercapitalized on the short term. Typically, it's the opposite. Most firms are, they tend to be short-sighted in that sense, where they want to see their return on spend very quickly. And so people tend to want to be in that short-term bucket and go heavy on PPC and those other quick turnaround channels. So usually we're having to push back and try and, educate our potential client or client on the benefits of having a long-term strategy and a brand. But to answer the question of like, where do you start, and how can you think about your spend and thinking about the ways to allocate initially, I would look at those buckets and see, a, is there a place we can spend more in one of those buckets that's working really well and we should just continue to blow it up? That's one question. The other question is, are we just completely neglecting all or a portion of these time horizon buckets? And there's opportunity there that we should be putting money into those time horizons.
So, um my mind is wandering here because I'm thinking about specific clients, right? Um, and I really like what you're laying out, right? Like, okay, so have somebody in your corner that is going, it's almost like you need a CMO, but instead of hiring a CMO, why don't you come to Pug Digital, and was that, no, I got your name wrong, right? What's the,
It's Mean Pug, but
yeah,
it's close.
Mean Pug Digital, right? Come to Mean Pug Digital, and we'll basically help you analyze all your options and come up with the best thing for you, from your budget, from your market, from your brand name recognition, from the client that you're trying to acquire. We'll take all those pieces and we're going to come up with a strategy and a plan for you. What's somebody to do with all of the existing vendor relationships that they have? So they've got, maybe they have an SEO vendor that's really killing it for them, but they're trying to expand their portfolio beyond that. And they're like, okay, what, now what? But we actually don't have somebody who's driving this conversation. We'd love to engage with you and look at that. How do you navigate is there a transition to a bespoke marketing agency, or is it kind of like, yeah, we'll help you, we'll sit in that CMO seat and we'll drive new initiatives, but we'll let you hold on to your existing vendors because it's working for you, or you have that long-term relationship and we're not looking to rock the boat there?
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with something there. What I always say in our initial conversations with clients, if you know exactly what you need, like, coming into this conversation, I want 2 blog posts a month. I want 3 social media posts a month. I want $5,000 of PPC spend on, informational terms. If you know those answers, then we're not the right fit for you. If you don't know those answers and you want somebody to help guide you and kind of lead your budget in the right direction, that's where we're a good fit. Um, in terms of like working with other teams, phasing in and out vendors, things like that, those are all kind of par for the course. We've worked with existing teams, and if you have an SEO vendor that's crushing it for you, I probably wouldn't recommend pulling us in. Why switch something out that's working? Instead, we can sit in an oversight role. We can complement what they're doing with custom graphics. Our design team is excellent, so we can help there. We can figure out ways to amplify on paid search, right? So If your organic pages are killing it, maybe we're going to build some infographics that we can reuse on a landing page that will run for paid search, and we'll also use it on organic. So you're not wasting spend by having multiple vendors when you work with us, because we're going to help you maximize your budget regardless of where it's going.
It's interesting because, from the answers that you gave, it almost feels like you view yourself as an SEO shop, right? Like it's interesting because uh, there's all this other stuff. Like, what about radio and TV? What about billboards? What about the B2B thing that you talked about? Like, where does that all fit into this, to this conversation? Um, is that did I get something wrong or
No, those all fit in. It's just that they're limiting. You're not going to run TV, radio, billboard on the vast majority of firm budgets, right? The worst thing you can do in those channels, in any of the like traditional media channels, is undercapitalize.
Mhm,
You're the number 5, 6 spender in your market. You are throwing money in the incinerator.
mhm,
So it's just not, it makes sense for the firms where it makes sense, which I know is kind of a vague answer, but it's probably the best way to put it. The B2B outreach and all those other things, we typically layer those in to our approach. So what I mean is, when you work with us, all of our models fall under a flat monthly retainer. So you work with us, you pay a flat fee monthly, and we help at the end of every month basically look at where we spent the money, where we think there's opportunity to spend the money next month. And now we have this plethora of services on our side that we can pick and choose from and say, hey, this month we're going to go heavy on outreach because we want to make sure that we're properly addressing that midterm time horizon. And we feel pretty confident with our cash flow from the previous month, so we don't have to go heavy on PPC, right? So we have this toolkit that we can pick and choose from each month.
I mean, can you give some sort of like budget idea of the various pieces of the puzzle? Because like you said, hey, look, radio and TV, billboards, they might not be for everybody. You can't undercapitalize them. I know it's market specific. I know that if you're in New York City, it's going to be way more budget required for radio and TV than if you're in Tallahassee, right? So like what are some guideposts to be like, I'm not even in that camp. Like, I'm not even thinking about that versus maybe I should be thinking about radio and TV, right? Like, is there a certain amount of spend that or marketing budget that like, all right, if your budget is in this range, then maybe we should be thinking about those things.
Yeah, it is really hard to say because you can't even just look at the demographic. Like you can't even just look at the number of eyeballs. New York, for instance, you also have to look at the competition in the market. New York, you're competing against international brands for those same eyeballs, right? So your billboard in Times Square, that you're competing against Macy's and Gap and whoever. Anybody who wants those eyeballs is going to be driving the price up pseudo artificially. You're not competing just against other lawyer billboards or what have you. So I could throw a number out, but
Hmm.
it's it I would take it with like the biggest possible grain of salt.
Hmm. All right, we're using like heavy kosher salt here, all right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is like that crystal stuff that it's like it doesn't even stick to your steak when you throw it on. It
straight
bounces off.
straight straight from the Dead Sea. Just
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
mind.
yeah. Um, if you are not a top 3 player in your market for your case type, I wouldn't even think about running uh out of home. So not no TV, no radio, no billboard. Um, if you are in the top 3, uh I can't imagine that you'd have success if you have a overall marketing budget of less than in any area like 20 to 30K a month.
Hmm.
And that's like bare bones minimum. Um if you're in a big market, you're in, let's put New York out of the equation because it's a beast. If you're in Chicago or, Houston or any of the major markets, Charlotte, I that number is going to be 50 to 70,000 a month, most likely.
Got it. And what's the time frame for a campaign like that? So you said there's immediate, so we know the immediate are like your LSAs, your PPCs, the things that you're basically paying for a lead, that lead, right? And that lead is actively looking for a service, and you're going to provide that service. Um, where does the where does that mass media, the billboards, the TVs, the radio spots, is that in the medium term? Is that in the long term? Like when does the payoff for that start to get realized?
Typically, something like billboard's not going to be direct response. You can run direct response TV commercials. So if you've everyone has seen those, like attention, attention. Have you been affected by mesothelioma or like by
Mhm.
asbestos, right? And you might have a mesothelioma claim. That's a direct response TV commercial. And the idea there is that you can see pseudo immediate payoff from running those spots. Obviously, as they run longer and your frequency gets higher and higher, you should start to see economies of scale on TV, which you don't get, by the way, in digital. It's reverse economies of scale. So on TV, you will see economies of scale the more you spend and the more frequency you have. Um, but typically, TV, radio, billboard, you should be viewing those as like medium to long term time horizon return on investment. Usually they're built for brand lift.
Yeah, so if we look at the menu of marketing that's out there, right? Is there a pecking order that somebody should be using to climb the ladder of marketing? Like, um, is there like a, hey, if you haven't done this, this is what you got to do first kind of thing? And I know that the answer is it depends, but let's just talk broadly and, like the general firm, like, 80% of the people coming across your desk, and when they come in, we're going to go through this iteration. We'll be like, hey, if you haven't, connected with all the lawyers in your area, then you need to do that first before you decide to spend 30,000 a month on PPC.
It doesn't depend. The first thing you need to do is build a differentiated brand. If you look like everybody else, then you're gonna there's gonna be no reason to choose you over anybody else. So number one is build a differentiated brand.
So let's talk about that. I mean, I like that. That's a different direction than we've been speaking so far, right? Like what goes into a differentiated brand? Like what like are we talking about their unique story? Are we talking about their website looking different? Are we talking about some firm video? Like what does that mean, differentiated brand? How do we go about doing that? Let's dive into that a bit.
I think first and foremost, it's working with a team that can help realize a vision, right? So if you end up working with a team that wants to, as I said before, kind of fit a square peg in a round hole because there's a process, this works for 1,000 other people, it has to work for you, then your process for building a brand will also fit that same mold that 1,000 other people went through. So I think first and foremost, it's working with a team that wants to be collaborative and kind of suss out the things that make you differentiated and unique. Beyond that, I there's not one like single thing you can point to that makes a successful brand, but I do think you have to really think deeply about what makes you different and why someone should choose you. And, in legal, I've said this before, you have the people who are the most aggressive, you have the people who are the most like compassionate, the most whatever, competent. These are like adjectives that are thrown around for law firms. You don't have to be any of those, but you do have to be the most something. You have to think about what that most is and then really like double down on what that means when it comes to your messaging, your visual aesthetic, everything that kind of encompasses what a brand is.
Is there anybody who's too small to do that? Like, and really, the question is not about like what does it cost to do this. I think it's more like clarity. I think that when you're early in your law firm journey, I'm not sure that owners have clarity around what that differentiating thing is.
I would make the argument that if you don't have that clarity, maybe it's not time to have a law firm. I think you should know when you're starting out a firm what you want to be and who you are.
Got it. And that's really like, okay, what like why am I doing what I'm doing? Who are the clients that I'm serving? How am I serving them? What kind of experience am I creating for them? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. If you're starting out and you don't know if you want to go to trial, you don't know if you want to work hands-on with clients, that's probably a problem. And maybe you need a little bit more time to figure it out.
Yeah,
But I don't think that's the case. I think most lawyers do know when they're at the point of starting their firm, those foundational elements that make them excited to be a lawyer and kind of grow their practice.
yeah, I mean, look, those are differentiating factors, right? Like, but I mean, let's just say like personal injury. If I know that I want to focus on pre-suit cases, I don't want to litigate. As much as possible, we don't want to litigate. Maybe we have a partner firm that we're going to send all of our litigation business to and just get a percentage off of that. Um, but is that enough when you're talking about like distinguishing factors and like is just knowing what type of case I want to handle enough or it sounds like it's a lot more than that, right?
It's definitely a lot more than that. Like yeah, you wouldn't go to market as the brand that doesn't litigate your cases. that that would probably be like ill-advised. Um, I think you have to have a deeper connection to why you became a lawyer, what makes you excited about practicing the law, why you like to help your clients, and you probably shouldn't just say the money. Those are the types of questions that I'm really referring to, not, what case type you practice and are you going to do pre-lit or go to litigation? Like these are just like some of the elements. I can say for us, it's really hard to reduce this to just a couple of quick questions because when we start with a client, we've built out a brief, which is like 40 pages long that we walk through with clients to suss out these answers because of what you're kind of describing. It's not so surface level. What makes you unique and what a brand is. It's not easy to answer in many cases. So we've got to kind of tease that answer out over time.
Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about like really goes hand in hand. We had a guest on the podcast. His name is Paul Fariga, and the name of the episode is "What's Your Law Firm's Capital S Story?" It's episode 338. For anybody who wants to go listen to it, you can go to profitwithlaw.com/338. My team will link that up in the show notes. But basically, the whole premise there is like really getting clear on what the story is behind your firm so that when you're out there marketing, you're able to personalize who you are because there's a story behind it. And I think that that can encapsulate and encompass all of these things that we're talking about. Um, I also, I really appreciate the fact that you're kind of like putting this all together, like you really need to know this going in. And you said like you wouldn't go to market saying, "Hey, we don't litigate cases," right? But I think that there is a way to spin that and go to market with it. Like what happens if everything you do is pre-suit? Well, you're trying to get the money quickly, right? So they're going to go somewhere else. They might get the max value, but it's going to take them 18 months or 36 months or whatever to get money from it. You may go to market and say, we're passionate about getting dollars in your pocket as quick as possible. So we'll try to get you a settlement within 90 days. And then if somebody sits there in an interview and says, "Hey, I'm looking for the maximum amount I can get and I'm willing to wait 3 years for it," great, perfect. Let's put you in touch with Attorney X, right?
Or
So
maybe even better, go in with don't pay 33%, right? If you're going pre-suit, maybe you can, and you're doing volume, maybe you can go in at 20% for your
mhm,
contingency or 25%. And
right.
yes, it's more money in their pocket, or it's money in their pocket quicker. It's also less spend for your lawyer.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, no, I think you're 100% right that there is ways to spin even something like uh, being the
We
pre-suit.
like we don't go to bat for you.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We won't fight for you.
Yeah, I think it's important because these differentiators are important to talk about because marketing is all about how you position something. There's never something that's bad, right? Like I I mean, look at one of the most famous marketing campaigns is for Squatty Potty, right? Like, how do you campaign a stool that's going to help you, have a more comfortable pooping experience, right? And they got together with the Harmon brothers and created this amazing, video of a unicorn pooping rainbow ice cream, and basically describing how their product works. So marketing is all about taking something that perhaps doesn't look good on the surface, but you can, make it look good by putting the right spin on it. And that's really like going back to what Bobby is sharing. I think that getting really familiar and comfortable with your differentiating factors, it's the thing that's going to get people to want to work with you. So, yeah, really, I love that as the thing that you chose. I think that you're absolutely right. Like, if you get clear on that, everything else can kind of fall into place from there.
Agreed.
All right, so Bobby, we're gonna wrap up shortly, but is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask that's like, hey, look, we're having a marketing conversation. How come we didn't talk about this?
I mean, marketing, like you said, is so broad, and AI is a hot topic right now. So that could be an episode in and of itself.
Hmm.
Um, I think one quick note that I would like to call out is don't think about marketing as everything that happens pre-intake. I think that's a mistake that many firms, especially on the smaller side, tend to make. They think the job's done once the lead has come in, and they don't focus on what does your automated outreach look like post intake. How often are you running this? When does this opportunity die? What's your close date on it? um, Everything that really like a sales organization understands at its roots or at its core. I think those are things that kind of get lost on a lot of law firms. And I think a huge problem, like a huge part of that, is the marketing agencies around it. They tend to view their job as done once an intake has been created, because that's where measurement stops. Um, so I would advise that you think about your marketing all the way through to the point that a retainer signed, if not beyond.
Yeah, no, I think it is beyond. I think that marketing is includes the client experience, right? Like, if you really want to look at the holistic picture, yeah, get somebody in the door. But if you don't have people leaving the exit on the other side of it who are thrilled and happy with the experience and shouting from the rooftops about how amazing your law firm is, then you've essentially created this situation where you're trying to, run on a treadmill downhill and instead you're running on an uphill, right? Like this, when every single new lead that's coming in has to be all of this lifting that you need to do to make that happen, it becomes much more difficult. Firms that are in business for a number of years have a certain amount of businesses coming in just from referrals and returning clients. That doesn't happen if you don't do a good job in the delivery of the experience. And it's not just deliver good legal services. Think about the opportunities that you have to send a little, client welcome kit when they first become a client, and when the case is settled or completed for whatever reason, making an experience out of that. There's opportunities that really doesn't cost a lot. Add a small amount to your marketing budget, put that into place, and that's going to drive the needle a lot further than a lot of the other things that you're going to do on the front end. But something that you said, Bobby, really um, made me realize we didn't cover this at all. And maybe this is also another episode, but let's talk about it briefly. Tracking metrics. I feel like firms who are spending decent amounts on marketing, they've got this in place, but there's a lot of firms, that just haven't got that set up, which is simple. How does the CRM know where this lead came from? There's digital ways to do that. And then there's also just, gathering that information. Problem is that if you ask somebody like, I don't know, I found you on Google, right? Like they have no idea whether you came from an LSA or an ad in the map pack or or the first, free result on the page.
Yeah,
Um, so I think having the data on that is so important, driving so much of the decisions that we make. Is there an opportunity for smaller firms to start doing that right from the get-go? And how easy or difficult is that to implement?
absolutely. And you can start as small as you'd like. I mean, take a snippet of JavaScript and very short snippet of JavaScript, and you could pull UTM parameters and make sure that, form submission emails, when you get a submission from your site that somebody's filled in their form, you've injected these UTM params, and you can see they came in from Google, they came in from Facebook, they came in from whatever. It was a paid campaign, it was a free campaign. You could start that simple, and then the how you expand on that can kind of grow arbitrarily complex too, right? You could have obviously CRM integrations, so you're pushing in these attribution params so you can tie out your retainers at the end of the day to marketing campaigns. You can set up call tracking so that not just on the form fill side, but also on your call side, what's driving calls. Is it social campaigns? Is it, organic campaigns? Is it direct? Is it email? Whatever it might be. So you can set up call, and you can do more complex things like multi-touch modeling. How much attribution should you give to all your different, because for most users, they're not just seeing you once and then converting. They're seeing you on TV, then they're going to the site, then they bounce, then you hit them with a retargeting ad, then they came back, and then they went to a couple of pages, and then they converted. How much weight should be given to each step in that user journey? So that's an entire SaaS product in and of itself. So it can go from very simplistic to very complex, but start somewhere and get something in place is my recommendation.
Yeah, I love that, but to dumb it down even further, because I mean, there's most of our listeners are not marketers, right? So JavaScript, I mean, we already lost them, right? Is there a product that they can purchase that they can just connect this, connect that, and let the thing do create that JavaScript, put it on their website? Like, is there a service that they can buy? How does somebody just implement this without having the technical know-how and knowledge?
You're not going to get uh, dropped Google Analytics and Microsoft Clarity. And Moshe, if you could link to these, that's even better. And Clarity, swap it out for Hotjar, Clarity, what is it, ClickFunnels, any of the heat tracking software. Those are going to get you the two primary things that you're going to want to track. Google Analytics, you're going to use for aggregate analytics. So being able to look at data in mass and understand behavior in mass. And then Clarity or another heat tracking software to look at user behavior in micro, right? So at the session level, understanding how are users interacting with the page, where are you potentially losing them in the page, and being able to optimize in that way. So those are the two that are kind of drag and drop easy solutions.
Awesome. I love it. And I love how these conversations always come back to a place where you're like, well, now my head is spinning, right? And nothing against you, Bobby. Like this is not it's not a knock. It's really, I think that law firm owners you need to know enough to know what you need to know and not to know what you need to know how to do, right? So I love the title of the book, Who Not How, right? But ultimately, like um that's something that we need to embrace at every step of the journey when we're running our firm. So you listen to this podcast and you're like, okay, I need to go and figure out how to do this. No, you don't. You need to figure out how to pick up the phone and call Bobby or go on whatever site and find somebody who can do it for you, right? Like don't try to figure this stuff out on your own. That's going to be a rabbit hole you're going to go down. That's not where you should be spending your time. But knowing and understanding that these metrics are important. I need to be tracking them. I need to know where my leads are coming from. This is going to drive everything that we do. So it's that simple to figure it out and connect it. Well, let me figure out how to find the right person to make that happen for me, so that I can move on with better information. That's really where I want people to be thinking, and I want to just come back to that as we're going to close out this episode. Like everything that we talked about You don't need to know the agenda. You don't need to know, am I ready for radio and TV? Am I, should I be putting up billboards? Should I be allocating money to PPC? You don't have to know that. But what you do need to know is that those are all options and they may be viable options for you, especially if you're top three in your market, right? Like, I haven't really been thinking about radio and TV, but maybe that's something I should be thinking about. So let's have a conversation around that. And I don't want to focus there, right? Like there's so many other things you can be doing at smaller budgets, PPC LSAs, SEO, uh, B2B opportunities. Even I have a client who just hired somebody to be a business development person in their marketplace. Like just go and host events and go to networking groups and just really connect with people. And once again, doesn't have to be you, right? Like, yeah, really good top tier relationships, probably you should be having those. But there's a lot of, smaller relationships. You're not going to be able to manage them all. You don't have the time to do that. But each of those relationships could be driving 1 or 2 clients a year. You need 100 clients a year, have 50 relationships. It sounds daunting, but you can hire somebody to be that person to do that for you. I love this conversation and the fact that we took this holistic approach around marketing, but I want to bring it all back to, don't try to figure this stuff out yourself. Get somebody in your corner, whether it's Mean Pug Digital and Bobby and his team, or whether it's hiring a head of marketing or or a fractional CMO, or going out into the marketplace, knowing what you want to evaluate and just evaluating some vendors. But I think that the last place you want to be is trying to figure this stuff out yourself, because that's a very long road to success. When with a little bit of capital and putting the right expertise in place, you can win way faster than that. Bobby, as we close out the show, I want to just give you 2 opportunities. I do this with every guest. One is one parting piece of advice or wisdom you want to share with our audience. And the second is, how do they find out more about you, connect with you, take the next step if, something that you said or this interview really got them interested in examining, whether working with Mean Pug Digital is something for them.
In terms of advice, I really, really love working with clients that have an open mind and want to do creative things and are willing to trust in the process. So my advice is like, take some risks in your marketing. I know that as lawyers, that can be a daunting prospect because you know the downside, but take some risks and it'll pay off. Where you can find us, meanpug.com, or just send us an email, bark@meanpug.com. Yes, we've kept the brand whole there. So you'll find us around. We're very active across all our profiles and happy to chat with anybody. And, even if you're not looking, happy to just have a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bobby. Really appreciate you being here. Folks, if you are listening to the podcast for the very first time, we would love it if you smash that subscribe button, or if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button there in the YouTube player. Why? Why would you subscribe? Because you love this show and you want to come back and listen to more episodes. We release a new interview every single Thursday. You want to be notified when that is released and goes live. And you can also go back and binge on over 400 episodes that we've already done that we have in the archives for you. Everything we discussed, any links that we shared, anything that we talked about that you might want to go back and find is in the show notes for this episode. You can find that at profitwithlaw.com or in the description in your podcast player. We really appreciate you being here as a listener, and we are excited to share our next episode with you coming up in 1 week. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.